find out more. Arrive alive. Drive so.
You're watching Rogers TV, Midland.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Midland Cultural Centre, and welcome to A Day in the Life. Now, here is the host of A Day in the Life, Fred Hacker.
Well, good evening and welcome. We're really glad you're here. Thank you for coming to the Midland Cultural Centre and to A Day in the Life. We are very fortunate in that we have series sponsors as well as show sponsors. And our series sponsor is the wealth management firm of Bales, Dishaw, and Holloway. And is Jeff here? There, Jeff. I never know where to look. You're always in a different part of the crowd. So please convey to Kathy and Michelle and to Janet our gratitude for your support of the program. And we always like to tell folks that your company provides wealth management services and strategic advice to clients. So keep up the good work. We also have a show sponsor this evening, and our show sponsor is Barber and Haskell. And I think Tom Barber is here. Tom, thank you very much for your sponsorship of the program. It's all right to clap. Yeah, thank you. Who's the guy you're with? Our guest this evening once said, "Not only do I get to every Toronto Raptors home game, not only do they give me a microphone to scream into, but they pay me to do it." He's been called the voice and soul of the Toronto Raptors, and you have heard him say this.
Basketball fans, please welcome the starters for your Toronto Raptors!
Basketball fans, please welcome Herbie Kuhn.
Oh, good evening, everybody. Good evening. Fred.
Welcome.
That's just too hilarious. That was a long time ago, sir.
Yeah, there are some changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most notably hair.
Most notably hair.
Yes.
Yeah, most people
My
lose.
voice is similar, but the hair has grown for some reason.
Most people lose their hair. You grew
I
it.
did the opposite direction.
Yeah, good for
I
you.
shaved it for 20-something years and then decided to grow it back.
Well, it looks good.
Thank you.
It looks
Appreciate
good.
that.
Yeah.
My wife likes it. That's the most important
That
part.
is the only thing that matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're really glad to have you here, Herbie. We have watched you, I was at opening game in 1995, and we've been watching you make all those announcements for 26 or 28 years.
This is the 28th season now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really great to meet you. And I know our basketball fans here are going to be interested in knowing that there is more to Herbie than just the voice in the stadium, and we're going to try and explore some of that. So through you to our audience, I'll just explain that your life is because I've had the opportunity to delve into it a bit, quite inspirational, and we hope that you will inspire our audience. But we also want to look at some of the people who inspired you to achieve what you've achieved. So let's have a look at your early life, and we'll work our way towards your current positions.
Let's start at the beginning.
Start at the beginning.
Yes.
Where was the beginning?
The beginning was Mount Sinai Hospital on University Avenue, downtown Toronto. Absolutely. January of 1969. Yes.
So you were born in Toronto?
I was born in Toronto.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
What part of the city did you grow up in?
Grew up in the beach area.
Okay.
East end of the city, 6 blocks east of Queen and Woodbine.
Okay.
Yeah, Toronto born and raised.
So Herbie, your lineage is interesting. Tell us about your mom, first of all.
Mom was from Guyana.
Okay.
in South America. It's next door to Venezuela.
Right.
And she came to Canada in 1963 as part of a government-sponsored program, and they were called at that point, the term was domestic, and they were placed into certain households to assist, kind of like a nannying type position, assisting with family affairs and whatnot. And her first home was in the Bathurst and Eglinton area of the west end of Toronto, interestingly.
And if you had to describe her in a word or two, what would they be?
Loving,
Yeah.
compassionate, and faith-filled.
Wow.
Yeah. Loving, compassionate, and faith-filled. I never had to wonder, never had to guess, Fred, was I loved, was I cared for?
Yeah.
Mom made sure, both through actions and in speech, that was communicated on a regular basis.
Special. Yeah.
Yeah, very special.
And tell us about your dad.
Dad came to Canada also in 1963, completely separately from my mom. He was from former West Germany. And he used to work, I wonder how many people listening to the show, watching the show, or here in our audience, have any Bosch appliances at their home. B-O-S-C-H. There you go. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Way back in the day, my dad worked for Robert Bosch, the company, and was actually sent to Canada as a trainer, helping people with some of the new technology that Bosch had developed. And while he was here, while my mom was here, these two people from different countries, from different continents, met one another at a home gathering, if I'm led to believe correctly. And once they met each other, things got cooking from there.
You have probably said words that will make our sponsor very happy, because you heard me introduce Barber and Haskell, which is an appliance store.
Yes.
So, Tommy, did we do well by
I
Bosch?
did not know that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do they sell Bosch products? Yes, there you go. Absolutely. So my mom and dad married in 1965, and I was born in 1969. I'm a first-generation Canadian, and I'm so grateful for that unique lineage. Yeah.
It's special. We'll talk more about your parents later, but I do know they passed away recently and very close together.
Yes, sir. Last year, 2021, on April the 28th, my wife went to visit. Actually, she called first, got no response, went to my mom and dad's home, and unfortunately found my father already deceased on the floor from a suspected heart attack. And my mom, her health had been declining significantly over the previous few months, to the point where, due to an, at that time, undiagnosed illness, she was falling regularly, and she had actually lost her ability to speak. So it was a really challenging set of circumstances we were going through, and my wife Stephanie was essentially their primary caregiver, taking them to appointments, arranging groceries, that type of thing. And so we won't go into too much detail, but my mom was at the house, but she was on the floor. She was unable to get up, because my dad was usually the one that would help her up.
Yeah.
So he passed away on April the 28th, and then there was a hospital stay that ensued. My mom came to live with us on June the 2nd, 5 weeks or so later, and by God's grace, we were able to have her under our roof for 12 days.
Wow.
And on June the 14th, with, a complete, almost opposites. My dad presumably passed away alone.
Yeah.
My mom was in the house, but not near him.
Yeah.
Whereas my mom, Patricia, I was holding her hand. My son was holding my right hand. He was holding my wife's hand, and my wife was holding my mom's hand. It was
Perfect.
a beautiful circle when she drew her final breath and went home to be with the Lord. And it was painful to lose both parents 47 days apart.
Yeah.
But I'm forever grateful for not only their love, Fred, but the legacy they've left in terms of their demonstration of a work ethic, a demonstration of faith-filled living, a demonstration of think for yourself. Don't always believe what everybody's telling you.
Yeah.
Make sure you come to your own conclusions. They're, a real great middle-class, hard-working, blue-collar family. That's what the beach area was at that time. Yeah. It's since evolved, to put it nicely. It's since evolved, but at that point, it was a middle to upper middle to upper middle class neighborhood, and it was such a thrill to grow up there. Kids all over the place, playing with buddies, playing lacrosse, playing hockey. Great place to grow up in.
Your story is kind of the Canadian dream, isn't it?
It is. The first generation Canadian, born and raised in the East End of Toronto, playing sports, loved by his family. Really, really blessed, really grateful.
Well, let's go back a little bit and pick up at school days.
Yeah.
One of the things, we've talked about this, so I don't want the audience to think that I'm springing this on you. But what role did race play in your early days?
It's interesting because my dad was as white can be from West Germany, and my mom was black, although not very dark skinned. You could tell that she was black. You could tell that she was obviously from that ethnic lineage. Although, so for me, my skin color, I do not present as a black person necessarily.
Yeah.
But if you knew me back in the day with the big, thick afro, I actually had some serious hair going on way back in the day. I've tried letting it grow a little bit now, and it doesn't do the afro thing anymore. It just kind of gets wavy and out of control. So, but back in the day, I had a thick black afro. Yeah. And that combined with the fact that in the beach area at that time, minorities were... There's a reason they use the word minority, a very, very, very small percentage. And I will say honestly, I don't recall any significant struggles that were race related. Most of my struggles growing up as a kid were weight related, actually. As a kid who was chubby and overweight and being called and taunted with names from my fellow schoolmates and whatnot, those types of things were more commonplace. But my mother, though, would always remind me, it wasn't like a daily thing, but she would consistently remind me, Herbie, your life will always have more challenges because you're black.
Okay.
Never, ever forget that you're black. Never forget that that blood is in you, and it is going to make things more difficult for you. Always be ready for that.
Now, what did your parents experience being a mixed marriage?
My parents, imagine a black woman and a white man walking down the streets in the mid-1960s, where south of the border, there were still many civil rights demonstrations and issues arising on a consistent basis. And although it wasn't quite that extreme in southern Ontario or in Toronto, we were not immune to that either. And my mother and father, and I have heard this directly from them, did endure catcalls and taunts about race, even walking along the sidewalk, holding hands. Hey, buddy, what are you doing with her? That type of thing. They never let it destroy them, though. Love was that was the guiding light, and that was all they cared about. You people can say whatever you want. We're in love with each other, and we're going to see this through. And by the time they passed away last year, let me just make sure I've got my math correctly. 1965, they would have, this November 27th that just passed recently, would have been their 57th wedding anniversary.
Oh, that's great.
So they celebrated 55 years of marriage. That's awesome. That tells you what was the priority for them.
That's special.
Yeah.
Now, you went to secondary school at Malvern.
Malvern Collegiate Institute.
And
can you tell I'm proud of that?
Yeah. Well, I understand that you made a recent visit back to the school.
Yes, indeed.
What's that all about?
I had the opportunity. It actually wasn't hosted at the school. It was hosted at a neutral location. But this past June, I was invited back to be the commencement speaker.
That's great.
The guest speaker, the keynote for the Malvern commencement for the graduating grade 12 students. I'm still not used to saying that. For some of us here in this audience today, you remember clearly when it was grade 13.
I suspect there's more
there just might be a couple here. But anyways, I was back for the Malvern commencement.
Good for you.
And you know how tough it is when they say you've got 5 minutes?
Oh, that's impossible. Yeah.
5 Bs of
my
public
line,
speaking.
and you can use this if you'd like, my line used to always be, I would say to people, how long do you want me to speak for?
Yes.
And if it was less than 10 minutes, I would have to prepare.
Exactly. The 5 Bs of public speaking. Be brief, brother. Be brief.
Be brief, brother.
Simple as that.
Okay.
I think I kept it to about 6.5 minutes, and they didn't complain. Yeah.
Now, you had a teacher at Malvern who
Yeah.
played a special role both then and later. Tell us quickly about that. If you will.
Yes. I still have a difficult time saying his first name because he was Mr. Lair.
Yeah.
You know, as a kid growing, you know, as a high school student. But Eric Lair was my drama teacher from grade 11 right through to grade 13. I did take drama in grade 10, but it was a different teacher. But Mr. Lair was my drama teacher for 3 years in high school. And he helped me discover my personality, if you will, on stage or in front of audiences. Helped me to develop a voice and confidence. Believe it or not, I was not always so confident in front of groups of people or audiences.
I find that a bit.
I know it's a bit of a stretch considering I can announce games to 20,000 people, you know, with no effort right now. But back then, I wasn't always that confident. And Mr. Lair, through his love for drama, his love for interpretation of words in a play or lyrics in a song, helped me to fall in love with theater. Helped me fall in love with take the audience 6 inches off of their seat. Bring that energy. Bring that energy. And I just relished that. And so throughout high school, I got to be part of several plays. Marty by Patty Chayefsky. I got to play a role in Grease, the musical Grease, where you had the Pink Ladies and the T-Birds, the Thunderbirds.
Yeah.
And there were so many of us in the cast, they created an extra T-Bird and an extra Pink Lady. So I got to be the extra T-Bird. Yes, that was so much fun. So that was singing and dancing in front of the crowd.
So it's a role that was created for you.
Yes, it was
that's how
exactly
special it
created
was.
for me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It was so much fun. And it was to the point where I got to be really comfortable. And now, you mentioned in your question, later in life.
Yeah.
These are the kind of things you can never plan and never predict. So from where I grew up and then where my wife and I lived when we first got married, we moved to a different area of Toronto where we still currently live, and we've been there for about 16 years now. And I did not know at the time that Mr. Lair lived literally about 300 meters from our house.
Wow.
300, 400 meters from our house. If I were to do, as the crow flies, from my front door to Mr. Lair's front door, I could be there in about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'll never forget the first time we were around our new neighborhood, and this car came by, and I hear brakes screeching, and this guy gets out of the car. Herbie Kuhn? I said, Mr. Lair, I can't believe it. And so, yeah, just an incredible blessing. So I still get to see him regularly.
That's great.
And the day my mom passed away, June the 14th, 2021, it was midday-ish when she passed away, and by the time all the arrangements and the funeral home had come and family had left the house, and it was just my family, my immediate family, and I said, Steph, we need to just go for a walk. I just need to clear my head. I was in so much grief, so much pain. So I just need to go for a walk, something familiar. And we weren't even at the end of the block, Fred. And a car goes by, brakes hit, stops, he gets out. It's, hey, Herbie. I said, Mr. Lair. And he gets out and he walks over, and he could just see from my body language that something was wrong. And he knew, he didn't know what had happened, but he immediately wrapped me up in an embrace. And I said, Eric, my mom passed away earlier today. And we just sobbed with each other.
Yeah.
A strong man, God put a strong, influential man in the right place at the right time, just when I needed him.
Yeah.
And that was, you can never replace that.
Oh,
Never replace that.
Very special.
Yeah.
Now, as a teen, sports were pretty important to you.
Yes.
Now, our audience might be interested in knowing, what was your sport and what was your position?
Well, my first sport was hockey.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I was a goalie. And I played pickup hockey up until most recently, about 3 or 4 years ago, probably before the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I always took great pleasure from being between the pipes and having people fire pucks at me at high velocity. It's a twisted Canadian thing, absolutely. And I played lacrosse as well. I played lacrosse for 10 years, and my first 5 years were as a goaltender as well. So glutton for punishment, whatever you want to call it. I love being a goalie, both hockey and lacrosse, and I still love those sports very much.
You told me something interesting. You said that when when you realized you weren't going to make it to the NHL,
Yeah.
which is a realization that every Canadian male reaches at some point
Yes.
or another.
Or most at least. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. About 400 don't reach that.
Yeah.
You went in a different direction, looking for the recognition.
Yes, that's a very diplomatic way of putting it. In high school, once I realized that sports, at least playing sports, was not going to be part of my income or my future or my calling, I started looking for attention in some unfavorable ways. And I started hanging around with some crowd that I wish I hadn't hung out with at that time. You live and you learn, right? And you try not to repeat those mistakes. But I did descend partway through grade 10 or so, latter part of grade 10, into a lifestyle that was, if people only know me today for the things I do today, you would never guess that I actually lived that lifestyle back then. It was something that I'm quite embarrassed about. Not ashamed to talk about it because I hope it'll divert someone from ever taking that path.
Yeah.
But yeah, I made a lot of mistakes, a lot of drinking, a lot of drugs, and a lot of stupid decisions. Ah, goodness, yes.
You ended up at Humber College
Yes, I did.
in the late 80s.
Yes.
What were you studying?
Theater performance, sir.
Okay.
Theater performance. 1 year.
1 year.
1988, 89.
That's a short course.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Now, in material that's been written about you, there's a lot of speculation about why you left.
Depends on who you ask, whether I got kicked out or dropped out.
Okay.
Yes, the
Well,
subject to interpretation.
We'll leave that question
Yes,
in the air.
but I studied, and you know what? This is a tip of the hat to Mr. Lair, right? He instilled such a love for theater in me, and that stage presence and being able to use, no matter what talents you have, to be able to use that to help energize and excite other people on stage, that I decided to pursue that. And yes, regrettably, it only lasted 1 year, but hey, yes.
And then
I still say I dropped out, but
Yeah,
we won't ask
we'll
anybody
leave
else.
it at that.
Yeah.
You took a bit of a sabbatical then, and where did you work then?
I worked at a grocery store on the Coxwell Avenue in the east end of Toronto. It was actually a store that I had worked at part-time during high school, for a couple years during high school. And once I left college, I was offered a full-time position there at the grocery store. It was a Mr. Grocer at the time.
Okay.
And eventually, over my time there, it transitioned to become a no frills. And I was I actually became not only a full-time employee, was promoted to one of the store managers.
Oh, good for
and
you.
at this age, I'm 21, 22 years old. I'm a store manager, earning a full-time salary, benefits package, doing pretty well from the outside and everything. But yeah, didn't really enjoy going to work every day. It was pretty much a grind. It's pretty much a grind.
So you got a reset. Where
Yes.
was that?
Vanier College.
Okay.
One of my customers at the store was a mother and daughter. And the mom used to teach in Quebec. They were from Montreal originally. And they told me about something I'd never heard of before, the CEGEP system.
Okay.
The CEGEP system is a college system in Quebec. It's a long acronym, CEGEP. And they told me that you could go to the CEGEP, put in an application as a mature student, which is an oxymoron if I've ever heard one right there, and that they had not only 3 and 4 year career courses, but 2-year pre-university courses as well. And I knew that I was not enjoying my work. I still had the luxury of having home, my mom and dad's home to fall back on. So it wasn't like I was responsible for any astronomical rent costs or mortgage payments or anything like that. And I thought, it's never a bad decision to further your education. It's never a bad decision to further your education. So I applied for a 2-year program in languages and literature. And by God's grace, I was accepted. And I attended Vanier beginning in late summer, early fall of 1992.
Now, your involvement in sports at that stage changed. You were very involved in sports,
Yes.
but not on the playing field. What kinds of things did you do?
Well, at that time, showing up at Vanier, the first thing I was interested in was playing rugby. So I had transitioned from lacrosse to rugby partway through high school, decided I wanted to pick up a gentler, easier, friendlier sport. And I played rugby. I was a loose head prop, right up there in the scrums. And I wanted to play rugby at Vanier, but they actually had an age cutoff at Vanier. So you had to have been born in whatever year or earlier, and I missed that cutoff. So I decided to use my knowledge of the game and my enthusiasm to sign on as assistant coach, kind of / team manager, and be the chief cheerleader for the team. And I got to be with the rugby team for 2 years, and actually won a provincial championship in my second year there. So
congratulations!
That was very exciting.
The first of many in different settings.
I've been really blessed with some sporting success.
We'll touch on that.
Yes, sir. We'll touch on that. Yeah.
Now you're also on the campus radio station.
Yeah. I was on.
And you had an
radio
elected
station.
position.
Yes, I did. Vanier was an awesome time, Fred. 2 years I was there, and I had the opportunity to first be involved with the school newspaper, and the first as a journalist, and the second year as the editor for the sports section.
Oh, good for you.
Yes, and then we had the campus radio station, and I became the host of the campus, my own radio show, where you would have heard a lot of 70s and 80s rock and roll, a lot of 70s and 80s rock and roll on my show. And the other way that I stayed involved with sports at Vanier was this announcing thing, which turns out it's worked out pretty well for me.
Yeah. So you did PA for Vanier?
Vanier College, yeah, but first, football, not basketball.
Oh, okay.
I started as a football announcer first.
Okay.
Yeah, not far into my career there, they asked me to announce a football game, and I said, sure. I did well. And they said, would you like to do our basketball teams? We have 4 basketball teams at Vanier. Men's and women's double A, men's and women's triple A. I said, you're going to keep paying me? They said, yeah, we'll keep paying you. And so for 2 years at Cégep Vanier College, the home of the Cheetahs, I was the voice of the Cheetahs, announcing first football and then basketball for 2
Now
years.
you did graduate from there.
Yes, I did.
I know there were some people on the edge of the chair.
Yes, I did. I did not get kicked out / dropout. No.
And not only that,
Yeah.
but you were an award winner.
I was crazy.
Yeah.
Who has a sense of humor in this place? We had a graduating class in '94, Fred, of approximately 500 students, 560 students, and they had this award, the Director of Student Services Award. So obviously the Director General, Director of Student Services, would be the person who oversees all the student-related matters, and they would select 6 people who were exceptional, or something like that. I must have fooled them somehow in terms of campus life. And for me, because I was so involved with sports, announcing, school newspaper, helping out with the rugby team, and also talking about sports on my radio show as well. And here's another miracle. I actually graduated with an 80 average from college, but I still don't understand who I had to pay off to get that to happen.
That's well done.
So they gave me, I was one of 6 people out of over 500 that won this Director of Student Services Award, and I still have that award on a window ledge in my basement, man.
Good for
Absolutely.
you. Isn't it
Boy,
interesting
dusty.
how things like that can be inspirational in and of themselves?
Yeah, and I'm humbly proud.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, high school wasn't easy for me. High school was a struggle between the party lifestyle and not always applying myself. I did not exactly excel academically. To go to Vanier and find my groove, and actually graduate with a respectable average that my mom was proud of.
Perfect.
That was pretty awesome. That was pretty awesome.
Now, I want to talk to you about your experience as a PA announcer. And I thought it would be helpful for our audience if you explained to us what a public address announcer does. What's the job? What are the qualifications? If there's a young person in our audience who wants to do that, how do they prepare?
So in terms of a qualification, absolute confidence. You have to be 100% absolutely confident that every time you open your mouth, something of value is going to come out, and you're going to say it with assurance. Even if occasionally you make a mistake, you need to say it with assurance and with confidence, because there are a whole lot of people listening to you. And the moment you start second-guessing yourself when you're doing live announcing, that's problematic. In terms of what do the responsibilities include, I can sum it up best like this: to relay the information of what's happening on the court to the fans in the arena in a professional and entertaining manner.
Mm-hmm.
That is it in a nutshell. And if I might add to that, because I'm allowed to be a homeboy, because I'm allowed to be enthusiastic for the Raptors, I can say to do so with an extra measure of creativity and enthusiasm as well. Mm-hmm. No doubt about it. That's why none of the visitors get a jam when they slam dunk the ball, right? It's only the home guys that get that, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. So
yeah, normally
the
visitors just get their name mentioned
they just
quietly.
Like Fred Hacker.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you were to score an 18-foot jump shot, Fred, and you were playing for whichever team, Fred Hacker. Yeah.
Oh, hum.
Yes, ho hum.
Oh, hum.
Yes.
So let's talk about where you got your sort of exposure that led to the position you're in now. It was 1994.
Yeah, the World Championships. Toronto and Hamilton co-hosted the World Championships of basketball in 1994. Dream Team 2 was part of that.
Right.
The original Dream Team took part in the Barcelona Olympics in 1992.
Yeah.
This was Dream Team 2. Shaquille O'Neal was on the team. Isaiah Thomas was supposed to play on the team, and I was selected as one of about a dozen announcers for those World Championships, based on, you ready for this, a VHS highlight tape that I put together. Oh yeah, somebody say VHS. I love it. A VHS highlight tape that I put together from some of my stuff at Vanier, and that, along with some great connections, allowed me to be hired as one of about a dozen announcers for those.
You also did something that I thought was pretty ingenious in terms of your application. Tell us about that.
You know what? Once I had been chosen, I asked the lady who was responsible for overseeing the PA announcers, I said, can I please get the rosters of all the teams ahead of time?
Now, these are international.
These are international. We're just talking 16 different countries here. She's like, what do you want them for ahead of time? I said, I need to make sure I've got the names correct by the time the first ball goes up in the air. So, within a few days, they were able to get the rosters from all 16 countries. And one of the beautiful things of living in a ethnically diverse city like Toronto, Fred, and this was in 1994. This is a far cry from the way it is today. It's even more diverse now. But even back then, I could go and find someone for whom Spanish was their mother tongue, and I would take the Puerto Rican and Spanish rosters, and I would go to that person, and I would say, I'm not leaving here until I can say those names as if I was from your country.
Yeah, good for you.
I got the Chinese roster, I got the Korean roster, I got the Greek roster, whatever it was, and I was able to, either through personal connection or maybe, once removed, find someone who was from that country, and I'd say, I'm not leaving until I can say those names as if I was from your country. And that's part of the blessing of some linguistic expertise that I've been blessed with. So by the time I got to do my first game at Maple Leaf Gardens.
Whoa.
Woo! The Canadian kid who dreamt of playing hockey at Maple Leaf Gardens got to make his big-time announcing debut at 60 Carlton Street.
Wow.
And the first game I did, check this out, Croatia versus Cuba. Woo! You want to talk about a linguistic tongue twister. Let me tell you something. But you know what? I nailed it. Yeah. I'm proud to say I nailed it. And at the end of the tournament, not at the end of the tournament, at the end of the first full day of the tournament, one of the other announcers was released from his duties.
Huh?
I do not know why. I have no idea what the circumstances were. But the gentleman who had hired me and hired all the PA announcers had heard me do those first games and said, Herbie, I'm going to give you that guy's games too.
Ah.
Because success is when preparation meets opportunity.
There you go. Good.
Never forget that.
That's right.
Never forget that.
Yeah.
So by the time the tournament was done, 2.5 weeks later, I had announced for 13 of the 16 countries.
Wow.
13 of the 16 countries.
Yeah.
And that, unbeknownst to me at the time, became my unofficial audition for announcing for the Raptors.
And with the composition of the NBA today,
yes, sir.
you need all those.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good for you.
There are some fun ones. How do you like Juancho Hernan Gomez, the Raptors right now. Just last game, I was able to get in the numero 41, get in the number 41 in Spanish for him. He loved that. That was awesome, yeah.
And his brother played against him.
Isn't that interesting?
Yesterday.
Where was that?
New Orleans.
Oh, that was yesterday. Oh, goodness me. I wasn't even aware of that.
Yeah.
See, now I keep on learning.
Is that right?
Never stop learning.
Right?
I hope you're right, because you just said it on you said it in live audience. Someone's saying, it's good.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good.
Then you went to do announcing at Humber.
Yes.
Now, how did that come about?
My first regular public address announcing gig in the GTA was the Humber College Hawks.
Okay.
The Humber College Hawks. And here's how this came to be, and I'll try to make it as brief as possible. The NCAA was going to have a regular season game at Maple Leaf Gardens. Mm-hmm. This was within a couple months after those World Championships, so late 1994. And it was, I can't remember the other team, I think it was Georgetown. John Thompson was the coach. I can't remember the other team. And I asked if I could announce that game. But because it was being sponsored by the Fan 590 at the time, I think back then it was the Fan 1430, because it was being sponsored by them, one of their on-air personalities was able to get the gig doing the actual PA announcing. Mm-hmm. But they said, Herbie, we've got this halftime contest. Would you mind hosting the contest? I said, sure, be happy to. Anything you can do to get your voice out there in public. It's a great idea when you're trying to get a break, right? Well, guess what? The preliminary rounds for this contest took place, because it was through the radio station, took place at Humber College. So they asked me to go out to Humber College North Campus, Rexdale Boulevard, and they said, would you come out here and host this contest out here? And while I was there doing that, I met a gentleman by the name of Doug Fox, and Doug was the athletics director at Humber at that time and was for many, many years afterwards. Mm-hmm. And Doug came up to me afterwards. He said, hey, Herbie, great job out there. Do you do PA announcing as well? I said, yes, I do. He says, we're looking for a PA announcer right now for both basketball and volleyball, men's teams and women's teams. Would you be interested? Ha! Are you kidding me? So you going to pay me? Yeah, we're going to pay you. All right, let's go. Let's go. And so from January of 95, before I ever announced for, Jean Tabac or Damon Stoudemire or Carlos Rogers, I was announcing for the Hawks out at North Campus. And I actually got to announce for the Hawks from 1995 right through to 2001.
Even when you were
seasons.
working for the Raptors?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There were some weeks, Fred, where I would be announcing one night in front of 19,800 people, and the next night in front of 18 people. Seriously.
Yeah,
but here's the thing. I didn't do it any differently.
Yeah.
You give it your all every time.
Yeah.
You turn on the mic. You got to be prepared. You got to be ready. You got to be confident. And I gave it my all, regardless of the size of the audience, regardless of who the players were on the court. You give it your all, and that makes a difference. Makes a big difference.
Well, I think that brings us to 1995, fall 1995.
Yeah.
Significant time.
Yeah.
You applied for the job to be the PA announcer for the Toronto Raptors.
Yes, sir.
And you weren't chosen.
No, they chose somebody else first. I put in a phone call one day to the gentleman who was the same gentleman who had hired me for those World Championships.
Right.
The same one who had given me the extra games.
Yes.
This was the person. I put in a call one day, and he said, Herbie, I'm really sorry. Somebody else has been selected. And I was not a happy camper. Not a happy camper. However.
But.
Dot. Yes, ... Never say never. And what had happened, a lot of the people who were at those World Championships ended up being part of the formative staff of the Raptors.
Yes.
So I stayed in touch with some people, kept in touch with some phone calls and whatnot, occasional visits. And I don't know what I was thinking, Fred, but I let it be known to whoever I could talk to that if anything ever fell through, that I was still interested. Mm-hmm. And one day I got a phone call out of the blue from a lady by the name of Jamie Nishino, who was Brian Cooper's executive assistant. And Jamie said, Herbie, are you available to come down to the office the next couple of days? We'd like to talk to you about the public address announcer's position.
Wow.
After I got my job off the floor, I said, sure, Jamie, that'd be awesome. Went down there, and they offered me the job a couple of days later.
So you're 26 years old at this point.
Yeah. At that point, not right now.
No. And you've been announcing in front of 800 people at Humber.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're announcing, trying to pronounce names like Shaquille O'Neal.
Yes.
And Michael Jordan.
Yes. Our first game
and
at
Magic
Skydome.
Johnson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Irvin Magic Johnson. Our first game at Skydome, our first regular season game, which you were at, sir.
Yeah.
November the 3rd, 1995, against the New Jersey Nets. I believe the audience was around 33,000 that day because they moved some of the stands around, and there were actually there were some seats that they sold where people could only watch it on the screen. They couldn't they couldn't actually see the court. Yeah, there were about 33,000 people. So I went from Humber College, where I'm announcing games sometimes where you could count them in the dozens, seriously, to announcing for over 30,000 people. Yeah, it was quite an area code shift, no doubt about it.
Now, I'm going to come back in a few minutes because I have lots of questions for you about the Raptors. But just to keep the keep sort of the chronology going and to keep the sports fans waiting for the good stuff, I wanted to talk to you about another part of your life. You're on top of the world at this point. You've got this dream job. As I said in my introduction, you've got a front row seat to every Raptors home game. You get to interact with the crowd and the announcers and the
officials. Everything. Yeah.
And you find yourself in a bit of a spiritual conflict, shall we say? What's going on there?
Well, I had been raised in the church, east end of Toronto. It was always something I did because I was supposed to do it. It wasn't necessarily voluntary. Not that I resented it or anything like that, but as you get older, you start asking more questions. And early, let me make sure I've got my timing right here. Early in 1996, my mom and I left that church, the only church that I had ever known as a church home. At that time, professionally, I was going through some stuff as well. And I was in I was in some spiritual confusion. Wasn't sure quite what I believed, where to turn to, that type of thing. I'd never doubted God's existence or anything like that, but it was certainly, what on earth is my purpose down here? It's got to be more than this announcing thing, because yes, I was on top of the world from a professional perspective. If you looked from the exterior, you would have seen a guy living a beer commercial type of life. And, we'd go up to the Hard Rock Cafe after every game and party and whatnot, and having a great old time. But I'd go home every night feeling really, really empty and drained. And what happened was, in the spring of 1996, a very close friend who I had come to know in the previous year and a half by the name of Steve Kearns, knew about the challenges we were going through from a church perspective, and he said, "Can I suggest a place for you, a new church?" I said, "Sure, that'd be great." He says, "It's a different style, completely different than what you're used to, but it's not too far from where you are in the beach area. I think you'll like it." Famous last words. So he shared that with me in April of 1996. And so one Sunday morning in April of 1996, you've got to understand, I had never walked into a new church before in my life, unless it was for a wedding or a funeral. Okay? Other than that, I'd pretty much been at the same church my entire life. Now I'm walking to somewhere completely different. My mom had landed somewhere else, so I'm actually kind of on my own here. And I walked into the doors of Grant African Methodist Episcopal Church. Yes, Grant AME Church, 2 blocks east of Woodbine and Gerrard in Toronto's East End. And when I walked into Grant that Sunday, Mr. Hacker, my world changed. My everything changed. I didn't realize that style of enthusiasm and worship could exist in Southern Ontario. I thought that type of thing was reserved for Mississippi or Alabama or Georgia. I did not realize the first enduring memory I have is of the lady who welcomed me into the church and said, "Good morning. God bless you. It's nice to have you worship with us this morning." And the first thing I thought was, wow, she's in church and she looks like she actually wants to be here. Yeah, not she's being made to be here, but she wants to be here. And I walked in, and there was this choir, a 50 voice, mostly like 99% black gospel choir, coming down the middle of the row with robes and swinging and swaying and clapping their hands, and I just had no clue what was going on. Yeah. It was awesome. It was awesome.
Now, you mentioned 99%.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah. I'll never forget, I believe it was my first Sunday there, looking at this choir, thinking, my goodness, angels have touched down. Angels have touched down in Toronto, call Ghostbusters or something like that. And I'm looking up at this choir, and there was one white woman in the choir.
In the whole choir.
One white woman. I remember thinking to myself, she's got to have guts.
Yeah.
That's got to be something else to be up there with all these African Canadian sisters and brothers and belting it out. And I actually wondered, I wonder if that was common for her, like if that was a comfortable place for her, if she'd grown up like that. Yeah. Well, obviously I didn't realize it at the time, but now that I've been married to her for over 25 years, I know many of those answers. Yeah. I know many of those answers.
Oh, that's great.
Yes,
that's
great.
I
saw Stephanie up there in that choir, and we were introduced shortly thereafter. No Sparks at that time. It was a few months later in July of 1996 that we.
Well, tell us that
clicked.
story, because I think that's funny.
July 28th. Something about dates, huh? July 28th, 1996. I'm sitting in church. I've moved now. I used to sit in the back row because I was so nervous that people would recognize me. And I moved my way up, so I'm sitting about 3 rows back now. Not quite courtside, but we're getting close. 3 rows back, close to the middle. And Stephanie used to direct, you ready for this, a children's signing choir. A children's choir that would take a piece of music and interpret it into sign language. And they would actually play the music, but for those who were hearing impaired, they would actually sign the song. Yeah. And Stephanie was the director of this choir. And this particular Sunday, they usually performed once a month. They were called Signs of Praises. That was the name of the choir. And they were supposed to perform this particular Sunday. And the person who was supposed to do the lead portion, a rap, pulled a no-show. And Stephanie was the only person who actually knew how to sign it.
Now, wait a minute. So, a white woman is leading a rap.
Yes, in a black church.
In a black church.
Yes,
okay.
You nailed it, man.
Yeah.
You mean that doesn't happen every day? Doesn't happen every day? And so Stephanie's running around with like the proverbial chicken with her head cut off, trying to get this ready, trying to find out where this guy is. And she comes over with this bag, like, hi, how are you doing this morning? Good. She said, do you mind if I sit with you today? I say, hey, no problem. Have a seat. So she puts her stuff down, off she goes. She comes back and sits down at the start of service. The service goes on. She ends up doing the lead portion, the lead signing portion in this Kirk Franklin gospel song with a rap piece in it. And when it was done, everybody gave them this thunderous round of applause. And me, in my demure, subtle, unassuming way, I jumped up from the aisle when she was about to return to the seat, and I gave her a big bear hug in the middle aisle, in front of about 400 people. Gave her a big hug and said, congratulations, that was awesome. By the time it's a much, much longer story than we have time for here tonight, but by the end of that service, I knew that was going to be my wife.
Wow.
We went for a walk later that evening down to Ashbridges Bay. That was July 28th, 1996, and we've been together ever since.
Beautiful.
Been together ever
since.
since.
Great story.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I'm so pleased we made that decision.
Yeah.
Praise God.
Yeah.
Being married is awesome.
Yeah.
Being married is awesome.
Now, you mentioned earlier on in the conversation about confidence.
Yeah.
And obviously, what you do for a living requires confidence. And I don't think it'll be a surprise to anybody that I think you exude confidence, Herbie.
Thank you.
But this leads into the next part of your journey, because in 98, this is a couple of years later, you're 3 years into your Raptors gig.
Yes.
And you're invited to a youth basketball camp in Pickering.
Yeah.
Would you tell us that story?
Absolutely. So 1 year to the date after that first Raptors home game, November 3rd, 1996, at Grant, was when I made my personal decision to become a Christian, to accept God's offer of love and forgiveness through Christ. And that's when I became a Christian, on November 3rd, 1996. For the next 2 years, roughly, it was mentoring, learning from other men, going to Bible studies, that type of thing, continuing to go to church and grow in my faith. I got to know a gentleman named Bob Johnston, who worked with a Christian ministry called Athletes in Action, and he was running a basketball camp out of the gym, the basement gym of his church, Bayfair Baptist Church in Pickering, Ontario. And Bob said, "Herbie, I need you to come and speak to our basketball camp." I said, "No, absolutely not." I said, "I'm good to announce in front of 30,000 people, but you want me to get up in front of people and talk about my faith, talk about God?" I said, "No stinking way." He said, "Yes, I'd like you to do it." I said, "No." He said, "Yes." I said, "Well, what should I say?" He says, "Here's what you do. Pick a favorite scripture and tell them what Jesus has done in your life." I'm like, son of a gun. I can't argue with that one. Long story short, it was January, February 1998. I go out to Bayfair Baptist in Pickering, and I'm nervous. I am not exuding confidence, Fred. I am nervous. At this point, I've met Magic Johnson. Yeah. I've met Dr. J. I've met the commissioner. I've met all these people. You want me to go and talk about my faith in front of a group of kids and their parents? No stinking way. But I was nervous. And I got there and I said, okay, pick a favorite scripture, tell them what Jesus has done in your life. Okay, so I got there and I picked this scripture from Philippians chapter 4. I can do all things through God who strengthens me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I get there and I share, quite simply, this is how I used to live my life. This is when I became a Christian. And this is how things have changed. Really basic. And by the time I was done, everybody was cheering, and I shouted out, "I can do all things." And they would shout back, "I can do all things through him who strengthens me." And everybody's up on their feet cheering.
Beautiful.
I'm like, what the heck just happened? I had no clue. Yeah. And I turned my back to all these parents and kids, about 70 of them, and I looked up to the rafters, a couple of basketballs and dodgeballs stuck up in the ceiling. I said, "We've stumbled on something here, haven't we?" And if I've ever heard the Lord's voice audibly and clearly before, Fred, it was right there. And you know what he said? Uh-huh. That was it. Yeah. From there, the Raptors announcer, he's a Christian? Well, we got to get, you mean Herbie Kuhn? We got snowball effect. Yeah. And now here we are, 20-something years later, and I can't tell you how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of preaching engagements I've done. I did some as recently as last month. I've got one booked in a couple weeks from now. Yeah. And I'm confident now. I'm quite confident going up and sharing my faith. I'm no longer nervous doing that, fulfilling that role.
You referred to that occasion as an epiphany.
Yes, it was absolutely an epiphany. No doubt about it.
Yeah. Your voice had a second calling.
Yes, it wasn't only announcing basketball games. Yeah. No doubt about it. And there's a real, how much we'll talk about the chaplaincy later on.
Well, we're going to talk about that right now.
Alrighty then. Well, let me give you a perfect segue into that.
Perfect
segue into that. Basketball, professional sports, is all about what have you done for me lately? Yeah. Right? You don't perform time out. Guess what? Eventually, it's a short leash, right? Same thing with coaches, same thing no matter what the position is. Mm-hmm. And if you have been born and raised into a culture where you're the man, you're the woman, you're the go-to guy in that sport, what happens when the sport gets taken away from you? Mm-hmm. What happens when you're no longer able to play at that level? What happens if there's a season-ending or a career-ending injury? What happens if you're no longer the starter, but you're the last person off the bench?
Right.
It can mess with a person's identity. And as a chaplain, and we'll talk about the transition into chaplaincy later, my number one message is you're a child of God, number one, first and foremost. And that identity never changes, regardless of whether you're a starter, an all-star, or if you ride on the bench. You are still just as much loved by the Lord, regardless of what you do or don't do on that field, court, ice, etc. Mm-hmm. Your identity, that's key. And as a chaplain, that's a huge part of our responsibility.
So tell me briefly about the role that you play as a chaplain. And for our audience's benefit, you're the chaplain for the Toronto Argonauts.
Yes, sir.
Reasonably successful
team. You mean the defending Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts? Yes.
And you're also the co-chaplain for the Toronto Raptors.
Yes, sir.
So these are young men you're dealing with. I mean, I think sometimes people look at athletes and they say, well, you know, this is a men's sport, but a lot of these kids coming in are pretty young.
Yeah.
What's your role with
Well,
molding young men?
At its common denominator level in terms of regular responsibilities, we host pregame chapels, both with the Raptors and with the Argonauts across the CFL. That happens, and it actually happens across the NBA as well. Where the opportunity presents itself, we will do regular Bible studies as well. So with the Argonauts, we have a weekly Bible study every single week from the beginning of the season right up until the Friday in Regina at the Team Hotel before the Grey Cup.
Great.
Sitting there with a bunch of guys around the table and getting into God's Word. So those are the responsibilities, but it's so much more than that because it's about garnering trust and earning trust. So it's all about consistency. Now, there are different levels of access with the different teams. The NBA is far more guarded, shall we say, in terms of people accessing the players. So I do have a fair bit of access, but not as much as I do with the Argonauts. So in terms of building familiarity, building relationships, it's a little tougher on the basketball side. However, you're consistent with the Argonauts. I'm there at 90% of their practices, having meals with the team, getting to know the guys, so that if life does go sideways, if problems do occur or challenges do occur, which we know they will, they're dealing with someone that they're comfortable with who's not a stranger. And they know that there's someone trustworthy that they can confide in. And the best endorsement you can ever get is from a veteran, someone who's been there, done that in the league, saying to a younger player or a newer coach, saying, that's my guy. I trust him. And when you have that kind of endorsement, that can cover up take care of a lot of credibility with the players.
Empathy is really important.
Empathy is huge. Being able to say, I'm an athlete. Maybe I don't get paid to do what you do, but I am an athlete. I've been an athlete my entire life. I know what it's like to be injured. I know what it's like to walk off the field of play and wish you had done better. I know what it's like to be pulled off the venue of play. I understand all those emotions, and to be able to empathize and be with them. And you know what? Some of our life struggles, too, have helped in ministry. When you go through personal struggles, things like losing your parents, things like illnesses, struggles in marriage, struggles in parenting, what have you. And many of the individuals have been through some similar things. And when you can not just sympathize, but empathize with them, it makes a big difference. It makes a really, really big difference. So being a chaplain is an extremely fulfilling and satisfying calling.
Very special.
It is. And again, in a wonderful twist of spiritual fate, I work full-time with Athletes in Action.
Yeah.
The same ministry who Steve Kearns worked for, the gentleman who pointed me to Grant.
Right. Former CFL player.
Yeah. And also the chaplain of the Hamilton Tiger Cats.
Yes. We don't talk about
We only need to say that word once, yes. Yeah. And also Bob Johnson from Athletes in Action. Yeah. So now Steve and Bob and I used to meet together regularly, and now here I am full-time, my wife and I, with Athletes in Action for the last 15 years or so now. So, yeah, it's pretty awesome.
I read a question that you answered that I want to share with our friends here. It seems that you get asked a lot about whether you pray for your favorite team.
Do I pray for
I want
wins
to know, did you pray for the Argos?
No, I prayed with them.
Yes.
But not for a victory.
Yeah, okay.
No, I did not.
So what do you pray for?
I pray for, first and foremost, safety.
Yes.
Especially with football. Basketball can be a pretty physical game, too.
Yeah, just ask all the injured reps.
Yeah, just exactly. But football is more of a heavier contact, shall we say. And I pray for safety. I pray that every guy would walk off the field under his own steam. I pray that they would perform to the best of their abilities, that they would not bend under the spotlight, that they would not crumble under the heat of the game. And I pray that God would be glorified, because at the end of the day, He's a talent giver. He's the one that gave them their gifts and talents and their abilities And I pray that God would be glorified through not only the way they play, but the way they carry themselves, the way they interact with their opponents, with the officials, with their teammates, with the media, with the fans. Would you carry yourself in a way that represents the God who made you? Those are the types of things I pray for. I do not pray for wins because God's got kids on both teams. Yeah. Yep.
Now, I'm going to ask Glenn to get ready to show something on our screen up here, because I was thinking about both your chaplaincy and the rest of your life, but particularly the chaplaincy. There are some highs that come with your role.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we have a couple of pictures to show the highs. Glenn, can you show us that?
There you go.
Who's that guy?
There you go. That was just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Up on stage in beautiful, warm Regina, Saskatchewan. Yes, sir. Actually, all things considered, for late November, it wasn't all that bad. It was only about -10 at that point, I think, which for the prairies in November, that's pretty hot. Yeah, absolutely. Is there another one?
I think there's another one.
There we go.
Yeah.
That was at the rally.
Yeah.
That was just last Thursday. Well, I know this is going to be aired at a different time, but yeah, that was on November 24th, if I'm not mistaken, U.S. Thanksgiving.
Yeah. And
we had the rally out at Maple Leaf Square / Jurassic Park, and for the day we called it Argo Square.
Argo Square, perfect.
It was awesome. So that's Tavares Daniels to my right there, and we're celebrating our Grey Cup championship in front of thousands of Argonauts fans.
Must have been exciting.
Oh, so awesome. Yeah, that's 3 now. I've been part of 3 Grey Cup championships now.
Wow.
In 12, 13 years. Yeah, very cool.
Wonderful.
Very cool.
Now we can talk about the highs, and that's clearly one of the highs of being a chaplain is you're a Toronto Argonaut because you're the chaplain.
Yep.
By the way, is that ring?
That's 2017 Grey Cup.
Okay.
This is the one we won in Ottawa, where it snowed and it snowed and it snowed all game, where every single time out they had snow plows and shovels out on the field so they could clear the yard markers. That was
when
pretty
we
awesome.
bumped fists when you came on the stage.
Yeah, sorry, it didn't hurt your
just
knuckle there,
about
did I?
blinded me.
Yeah, something about that spotlight. It's a little bit shiny. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, that's the highs, but there also are some lows.
Oh, yeah.
And tell us about this next picture, if you will.
There we go. Yes. So, as part of my portfolio in ministry, about 5 years ago, I was presented with an opportunity to become a police chaplain. Separate, obviously, from professional sports. But once I explained to my bosses how the opportunity came to be, they could not deny that it was a divine calling, and I was given the opportunity to accept my role, the role as a chaplain with York Regional Police. And as part of YRP, there are many responsibilities, but amongst them, very similar to athletics, in terms of building consistency, building relationships, and supporting the officers through the ebbs and flows of their service to the public. South Simcoe Police, at this stage, do not have any chaplains as part of their service. The OPP does, Toronto does, there are a few other services that do, but York does, obviously, but South Simcoe does not. Because of the proximity geographically, York was asked to conduct the homicide investigation at the passing of Constable Morgan Russell and Constable Devin Northrup earlier this year. And so one of the officers who used to be at my home district, where I served primarily for York Regional Police, had gone on to be part of YRP's homicide team. And she became a liaison with the Northrup family. And when they were presented with the opportunity to have a chaplain represent them at the double funeral in Barrie, they said yes. And because of relationships, this particular officer said, well, I have a friend who's one of our team of chaplains. YRP actually has a team of 10 chaplains. I'm one of 10. But I'm the one that she knew. I'm the one that we had built a relationship with. And so she suggested me, and I got an email. By the time I saw the email, it was a Sunday morning. The officers had lost their lives the previous Thursday, and by the Monday afternoon, I was in a boardroom at Upper Canada Mall in Newmarket, meeting with the immediate family of Constable Northup. And learning about him, learning about the pain, and preparing to play a role to eulogize Constable Northup at the incredibly painful, powerful, impactful, emotional double funeral at the Sadlon Centre in Barrie earlier in 2022.
So that's you in uniform at
Yes.
the microphone.
Yes, that's me. That's me.
That's your chaplaincy.
Yeah, that's the role of a chaplain that nobody wants to play.
Yeah.
It's an incredible honor. It's an incredible honor. An unparalleled honor to be there. But to stand there in front of 4,500, 5,000 law enforcement personnel, including the immediate families, including the children,
It's hard.
is tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. But I'm so grateful I was asked to do it. And that particular picture, yeah, that wasn't easy, but what a rewarding experience it was. And now, here's the blessing. I still have an ongoing relationship now with the Northup family.
That's good.
I'm in touch with Devin's brother regularly. I will be in the new year meeting with his parents. We're continuing communication through a liaison with the parents. And yeah.
Well, you touched base with them today, didn't you?
Yeah. I was attempting to get together for a lunch or coffee visit with him in the area today. It didn't work out, but it will in the future. So, yeah, being a police chaplain is an awesome privilege.
I want to talk a little bit about you and about adversity and about how you handle it, because we talked about empathy briefly in terms of your chaplaincy role, but I'm just wondering, how do you handle adversity yourself? Your faith obviously plays a central role in that.
Faith is my anchor. Knowing, not panicking, not defaulting to fear and what if. When adversity comes, many of us, and I'm not pointing fingers because I'm prone to do this often myself, our natural reaction is, how am I going to make it through this? Some people might even say, I'll never make it through this. I've also spoken at police funerals for suicides. Okay?
Yeah.
Some people say, there's no way I'm going to make it through this, regardless of the degree of adversity, whether we're talking about a season-ending injury or whether we're talking about the diagnosis of a terminal illness. Adversity obviously comes in many different forms. If it's a marital issue, if it's a issue raising your child, whatever the case may be. For me, adversity, and I can honestly say that with age, it doesn't necessarily become easier, but with age, you have more experience to fall back on to say, you know what, you don't need to freak out right now. There is going to be a tomorrow. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. Keep taking another deep breath. Lean on the Lord with all of your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. And you will make it through. Point final, as we would say in Montreal. Point final. When my father and mother passed away 47 days apart, there were a few moments embedded in there, Fred, where I did not feel any enthusiasm for living whatsoever. I was in so much pain, emotional and spiritual pain. I did not consider ending my life or anything. It wasn't that, but it was. There were times where I said, "What do I have to live for right now? I'm not even sure if I can make it to tomorrow." But you can't catastrophize. You can't do the what ifs. You can't bow to fear. You have to lean into your faith. And for me, that's how I handle adversity. And you know what else is huge? Having a small group of people who you know you can count on. Not the fair weather friends, the all weather friends. Not the ones who are just going to hit you up for tickets, every time the Lakers are coming into town. Not those people. No. The ones who you can turn to at 2 in the morning if need be, and they're like, Herbie, what's up? I'm here for you. The people who are there when your parents have died and who are showing up with meals, who are there, I'm here for it. And Stephanie and I were overwhelmed. I keep saying Stephanie and I, my whole family, our son as well. But since Steph and I were the faces of the family, we were overwhelmed with support when my parents passing in illness and whatnot. And to have a close-knit community is instrumental, of paramount importance in terms of handling adversity. I also acknowledge in that same statement that not everybody has that.
Yeah.
And I know that's tough. It's tough.
You're a fit guy.
Reasonably.
I understand you
I'm
weren't
working on it.
always.
Yeah.
You run a lot.
Yes, I
You've
love it.
lost a lot of weight.
Yes.
How much do you run?
I currently run once or twice a week.
Okay.
Once or twice a week, and I combine that with cycling a couple times a week as well. And yes, I run outside in the wintertime. Absolutely.
During the pandemic,
Yes.
you did something quite remarkable.
Yeah, remarkable / insane.
Yeah, well, I was,
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
hunting for the right word.
I responded to a challenge, a Runner's World magazine challenge, to attempt to run at least a mile a day for 41 straight days. So I did it, and I kept going, and I kept going, and I kept going. And by the time I actually had to cease the running streak, I had run 581 consecutive days
Wow.
of at least a mile every single day.
Wow.
And encapsulated in that were a full marathon, several half marathons, and numerous 5Ks and 10K races as well.
So it kind of makes Mitch Marner's 18 games with points.
18 game point streak, yeah. Hey, listen, that's awesome. That's awesome. But yeah, 581 days in a row. Then I had just some disc issues started to creep up, so I had to stop for a while. But to get me to stop running, you're gonna need to put me in a you need to really, really take my legs out to do that.
Now, we want to get to the Raptors.
Yes.
And I'll just touch briefly on you're a father.
Yes.
You adopted a child.
Yes.
Interesting story. Can you tell us that really briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. I was from South Africa, and we were. I had been to South Africa previously on a mission trip with the Salvation Army back in 2003, I think it was. I can't remember the exact year off the top of my head, but I was there, and while I was there, I had a real sense that that I was God really shared that I was going to bring a child home from that country.
Wow.
And here's a great example of one of those things where you bring your personal experiences into ministering to others. The Apostle Paul talks about in Corinthians about the things that God has helped you through so you can help and assist others. My wife and I, unfortunately, struggled with infertility and not being able to have our own children biologically, which, when we were going through that, was one of the most, you spoke about adversity earlier, that was one of the most adverse situations that either of us had ever been through. Extremely painful. Extremely painful. And once we yielded that and said, okay, God, what's next? That's when the window became clear that we were to pursue the path of adoption. That's the short story. In 2006, in November, actually, right around this time of year, November, December, we went to South Africa. We worked with an agency in Toronto that actually pioneered the relationship between the Canadian and South African governments for international adoption. And we came home 6 days before Christmas with our little bundle of joy.
So you now have a 16-year-old.
Yes, he's no longer a little bundle of joy.
That.
He's a 5'10" bundle of joy.
Energy.
Yes.
Well, let's talk
And a
about
heck of a basketball player too, I might add.
Good for him.
Yes.
Good for him.
Yes, he put imagine that, a sports chaplain, and God put a pure athlete into my family. Talk about a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah,
oh man.
that's great.
Yeah.
What has been your ultimate highlight in your time with the Raptors?
Winning a championship, man.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I think that might do
2019. Beating Golden State in that final was awesome. I'm sorry we didn't get to win it at home.
Yeah,
but,
that would have been great.
But that part notwithstanding, winning a championship in 2019 was awesome. There have been many highlights along the way, getting to announce for certain individuals, announcing for certain breakthroughs in the franchise's experience. But yeah, winning that championship in 2019 was something really awesome.
What do you remember of it? Just give us a couple of highlights.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I remember that we lost the first game to Orlando in round one.
Yes.
And that was at home.
Yeah.
And I remember all the pundits saying, "Here we go again."
Yeah.
But then we went and took the next 4 games.
Yeah.
And then I remember against Philadelphia in the second round, most basketball fans, most even casual sports fans will remember Game 7 at Scotiabank Arena with Kawhi's bum, shot that won Game 7, where the arena erupted to the loudest I think I've ever heard it.
Yeah.
And then beating Milwaukee in 6 games, and watching the team really assert its confidence and its dominance over the Bucks was so awesome and exciting. And then the championship against Golden State, against Steph Curry and Draymond Green and Klay Thompson and Steve Kerr. And what really, the thing that stood out to me over the whole thing, Fred, was with each consecutive round, the spotlight got brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. More media and more media, more interview requests, more Herbie, can you do this? More Herbie, can you do that? Herbie, can you do this hit here? And meanwhile, I'm trying to stay focused on doing my job, right? But the attention, I will wrap it up with this so you can move on to your next question. The enthusiasm that it built across Canada.
Oh, absolutely.
When's the last time you had fans in Montreal, Calgary, Vancouver, Regina, Moncton, wherever, cheering for a Toronto team? It was and still is Canada's team. We are Canada's team. And the national sense of unity that was experienced, Jurassic Parks springing up all across the country, these public viewing parties. Oh, that's my, other than the winning itself, that's my highlight.
Yeah, I agree.
That is my highlight. The sense of sporting unity that it brought to our country was absolutely unprecedented, and it was so awesome to be a part of that.
You might remember which game it was, and I've forgotten now, but one of the highlights for me was when Kyle Lowry inbounded the ball right across the court to OG.
That was actually the following year.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
He makes
that
a
was
three-point shot. Everybody swarms him, and somebody said, how did you feel about that? Or, and
OG just says, well, I'm supposed to make this
what
shot.
I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. That was against the Celtics.
I don't shoot to miss.
Yeah, that was against the Celtics in the playoffs. The following year in Florida. Because things had relocated.
Yeah.
And if we had not won that game, we would have been eliminated, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
What's the funniest moment? What's the funny, and this is a question that was sent in to us to ask you. What's the funniest thing that you've seen a player do before or during a game?
The funniest thing I've seen a player do before, oh gosh. I mean, some players like LeBron has his big chalk thing that he does, the courtside showing you.
And he does that right in front of you.
Right in front of you. You got to get a towel and put it over your drink, over your notes, otherwise it's going to be chalky for the entire game. A player that we just played against recently, Robin Lopez, a big 7-foot center. He goes to the line. He has the funkiest free throw routine that I've ever seen, where he starts off facing sideways, turns, pushes his hair back, then gets the ball. Yeah, there are a lot of peculiar innuendos from players. Funniest thing that's ever happened to me could also maybe be called one of the most embarrassing things that's ever happened to me. Yeah, the Tracy story.
Tell. I love that.
The Tracy story. Way back in the day, you may recall, we had a player by the name of Tracy McGrady.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes, and we also had this.
And then you didn't have.
And then we didn't have it, exactly. That's a great way of putting it. And Tracy McGrady went to play for the Orlando Magic.
Right.
At that same time, as we were anticipating Orlando's first visit back to Toronto, Tracy Murray came around for his second stint with the Raptors at the time.
3-point specialist.
Yes, Mr. T for 3. Absolutely, Tracy Murray. And inadvertently, your guy here, foul was called on Tracy Murray, and I, with a live microphone in front of 20,000 people, said Raptors foul called on Tracy McGrady. And the entire audience started booing. Now, I don't think they were booing me necessarily. I think they were booing Tracy McGrady because they couldn't stand him because he left the Raptors.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll never forget. That was one of those ones where you wish there was a pause, take 2, let's do it again. But one of the things I love the most about my role as a public address announcer is the fact that you can't do that.
It's live.
It's live. The moment I say something, correct, incorrect, everybody hears it. And that's awesome. And I don't consider that pressure. I consider that a privilege.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to mention some names to you,
Oh, boy.
and I want you to give me a really quick impression because our
Okay.
clock is ticking down.
All right.
Okay?
Oh, boy.
Masai Ujiri.
Class act. Very knowledgeable. Yes. Great community builder.
Nick Nurse.
Hard worker. Smart coach. Very passionate. Very passionate. Loves to get on the refs' cases.
We see it every game.
Yeah.
Freddie.
Steady Freddy. Rockford, Illinois. Love him. Absolutely. Warrior. Warrior. Tough guy. Tough guy.
We mentioned OG.
OG Anunoby. Can I say Swiss Army knife? The dude's good at everything right now.
Yeah.
He's drilling 3-pointers. He's defending. He's rebounding. He's boxing out. He's covering Luka Doncic
Yeah.
and limiting him
Yeah.
to like 19, 20 points.
Yeah.
OG's like a Swiss Army knife. He's awesome. He's awesome.
He's now everybody's favorite player, suddenly.
Yeah. I've known about OG for years. He's awesome. But his game is so evolved this year. It's awesome.
You had a special relationship with Norm Powell.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
It came from chapel, actually. Okay. Norm's a Christian. Norm would make pregame chapel a regular part of his routine, and you spend more time with someone. Obviously, you get to know each other better, right? So time at the arena would evolve to text messaging, calls with each other, whatnot. And yeah, really, really special guy. Got to know him pretty well. We had our own little secret handshake before he'd go on record our own little routine. And
Pascal.
Pascal Siakam, Spicy P. How about overcoming humble beginnings?
Yeah.
From Cameroon. Like, he didn't start playing basketball. He wasn't one of those kids that picked up a basketball at the age of 5 or 6. He didn't start till later in life. So the fact that he's ascended to where he is a real testimony to hard work.
And I think the Raptors may be the only team in the NBA with 2 players from Cameroon.
That is a possibility. Yeah, he and Christian Coloca. It's a possibility. I don't know that definitively, but quite possible.
There aren't very many.
Yeah.
Scotty Barnes.
Scotty B, defending Rookie of the Year, someone who the city has embraced, a real fun-loving individual. Yeah.
We had Leo Routens as a guest here, and I know
Leo!
Yeah.
Yes!
So tell us about Leo. Is there anything you can tell us about Leo that we can repeat to him?
I've known Leo literally since day one, since 1995.
Yeah.
And to me, he has been nothing but a class act. Always friendly, always generous, always, hey, Herbie, how you doing? Never standoffish. And the fact that you've had him here on your show speaks volumes to me.
Yeah,
He must have been honored to be interviewed by you.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, I did just about look eye to eye to him. I think he's the only guest we've had that I had to look up to.
There you go. You go. Yeah. And of course, Leo, Canadian basketball icon as well.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because the NBA is full of Canadians now.
Yeah. Isn't it awesome?
It's great.
Back when I started, Fred, 1995, let's see if I get this right. I think there were 3 Canadians in the NBA. You had Bill Wennington on the Bulls, you had Rick Fox with the Lakers, and you had this kid from Victoria, BC by the name of Steve Nash.
Yeah,
you remember him?
He did well.
Yeah, he did okay. He did okay. 2-time MVP.
Yeah.
And so you had those 3 guys. Now, this season, this 2022-2023 season, opening day rosters, other than United States, more Canadians than any other country.
Yeah.
on NBA rosters for opening day. And if you take it down a level to the NCAA level, there are over 270 Canadians who are currently part of D1 or D2 programs across the U.S. The future of hoops in this country is bright, my man. Yeah. And I am so blessed, so grateful to have played a role in that as the soundtrack for your Toronto Raptors. Yeah.
Yeah, the outlook for the Canadian national team just
brighter, our men's
brighter.
team is qualified for the World Cup.
Yeah.
World Cup of basketball. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
That's great. Well, let's close with this question. What's the future hold for Herbie?
Continued happy marriage. 25 years is a great accomplishment.
Congratulations, that's wonderful.
And one of the cards that we got for our silver anniversary said, the next 25 will be the best to come.
There you go.
And I'm going to say a resounding amen to that one.
Yeah.
We've had a good 25 with its challenges. I'm looking forward to the next 25.
Good to hear.
Listen, my mom and dad went 55 years. My in-laws just passed their 56th wedding anniversary. I got a lot to look forward to. Personally, I'm looking forward to watching my son continue to grow and develop as a young man. Personally, I look forward to continuing to mature and deepen my relationship with the Lord. And professionally, who knows? I love being a chaplain. I love being an announcer. I will keep doing those things as long as I'm called to do it. And we'll see what the future holds. I don't know.
Well, hopefully you'll bring us another World Championship.
Another NBA championship sure would be sweet, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Herbie, I'm going to thank some folks, and then I'm going to come back and thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Thank the sponsors, Matt.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
You do that.
Yeah. So I do want to thank, first of all, Rogers Television for taping this program. It will be played back probably in January. I want to thank the MCC staff, our technician, Glenn Irwin, and our marketing and promotion coordinator, Michelle Fair. Thanks to our season sponsors. Jeff, please take our gratitude to Kathy and to Michelle and to Janet, and continue to provide that wealth management services and strategic advice. Thanks to Tom. I don't know, Tom might have had to jump out, but Barbara and Haskell, we appreciate your sponsorship.
Bosch Appliances.
Yeah. I want to thank our A Day in the Life team, some of whom are here tonight: Rod Ferguson, John Farragher, Brian McHale, Lorianne Clancy, Jen Parker, Doris Sloan. Is Brig Harvey in the house? Brig, would you stand up for a minute?
Less than 2 minutes
There
to
he
go in the
is.
quarter.
There he is.
That's my man.
Now, this is the official timer for the
Yes.
Toronto Raptors.
Yes, indeed.
Brig, thank you for being here.
Translation, he and I have worked beside each other, close to each other for a long time.
No, and Brig was instrumental in arranging to get you here, because you wouldn't answer my emails, but he got you to answer my emails.
No comment.
Yeah. Thanks to those of you who are here live. We will meet you out in the atrium afterwards, and I know Herbie will want to say hello to you. Thanks to our television audience. Herbie, what a joy it has been to get to know you. I've really enjoyed our time together, and you bring a lot to the table, my friend, a lot more than what people realize. So well done. Thanks for being with us, and all the best in the future.
Thank you, Fred. May the Lord bless you. And it's great to be here in Midland, beautiful Midland, Ontario.
Great.
What a blessing.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Woo!
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
Every European has their own story, their own tragedies, and their own triumphs. They laugh and they cry.
There are personal belongings scattered everywhere.
They strive for the best.
I'm fighting for freedom.
Together they have the power to make a better future. United in diversity. For every European, there is one channel. Euronews. Feel connected to Europe.